Good evening. It is January 29th, 2025, if you can believe it. It is 5:37 p.m. This is a meeting of the Communication and Policy Committee of the Concord School Board. I'm Cara Meeker, I'm the chair. With me also are board members Liz Boucher and Jim Richards. Barb Higgins is absent. Also with us tonight is Superintendent Kathleen Murphy and Karen Fisher-Anderson. Before I introduce our guest tonight, I do note that the agenda has us starting with a continued review of Policy 161 regarding discrimination, 161.1 regarding discrimination and the harassment grievance procedure, and then also now we have Policy 44, weapons on school property, because our guest is here to talk a little bit about that weapons policy in the context of her expertise. Unless anybody objects, I'm going to move it to the top of the agenda.
So moved.
When did you send it?
Second.
Yeah, without objection.
Yeah,
Great.
that's what, we're all good.
Great.
Did it not go through? I can just speak too.
Yeah.
You know,
I did have a message today.
I
but
can send it again if you'd like.
Yeah, send it
Yeah,
again.
no problem.
While she's doing that, why don't I go ahead and just introduce you, if you wouldn't mind stating your name,
Yeah.
occupation, and what you're here for tonight.
Hi, my name is Dr. Christine Arsenault. I am a pediatrician here in Concord, and I'm here to talk about the importance of secure gun storage for kids' safety, and also the importance of educating families about this.
Great. Thank you so much for being here. We always appreciate an expert opinion, especially when we're working with policy where we may not have special expertise. So we really appreciate you being here tonight and taking the time. Just to remind everybody, the reason this is on the table is because Ms. Boucher had brought an initial draft to us for updates to our existing policy that were modeled after Oyster River, I believe. Oyster River district's policy, so we know that it is language that is consistent and successful in another district, so it's a great place to start. What you have in front of you is that preliminary draft with a lot of highlights and some comments in the sidebar. This was an initial sort of back and forth that Liz and I had about how to shape that language. So what's in front of us tonight is very preliminary. It's not what I would even consider a clean first reading draft. And so it's very much open to modification. And then I believe after Dr. Arsenault's presentation, we're going to get some feedback from Superintendent Murphy regarding, I believe you had taken this preliminary copy to the administrators in the district to get their feedback. So we'll be hearing from Superintendent Murphy on that. I can stall no longer.
Yeah, I don't understand why yours hasn't come through yet.
Unfortunately, I'm not connected to the Wi-Fi here, so
I can, though. Can we just connect mine?
Yeah, and you could probably also just directly plug in.
Oh, okay. Let me just plug in.
it's very brief, so I could also just speak. That's fine.
Because this is recorded,
It's
on
helpful to
Concord
have.
it's super helpful just
Yeah.
to have it,
Mhm.
and then because it'll actually pop up on the TV. But I would say 2 more minutes, and then we'll go ahead and just do we'll just chat it up.
I just plugged it in.
Because you're right.
Oh, you're
Oh, whoop.
Okay.
Da-da-da. I'm going to scoot over.
Superintendent
this
to the rescue.
way.
I knew if we sometimes just slow. It's the best way I can put it.
Perfect.
All right.
Okay.
You're good now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So, as I mentioned, I'm here to talk about the importance of secure gun storage education, and specifically relating to the Concord Public School System. Next slide. As an overview, greater than 41% of New Hampshire residents own guns, so it is a pretty large percentage of the population relative to the national average. And New Hampshire, as we know, has few laws governing gun safety, as was previously mentioned. So their concealed guns are allowed on many K-12 campuses, not in Concord anymore. But there are few laws that govern or restrict who can carry a gun. For example, individuals convicted of a violent misdemeanor are allowed to own and carry a gun. Convicted felons, individuals who have been involuntarily committed to a psychiatric hospital. So many people are unaware and sort of would assume that there are more laws in place, but because there are very few laws in our state, it's important, next slide, to keep pace with the prevalence of firearms and educate our community about safe firearms storage. Next slide. So I wanted to talk a bit about 3 educational resources. The American Academy of Pediatrics. I didn't mention this, but I am the vice president of the New Hampshire chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics, has a really helpful comprehensive gun safety toolkit that has resources in both English and Spanish. And I'll show you just a couple of those in a minute, as well as Be Smart for Kids, which is a resource for, it stands for, now I'm going to forget the acronym, but it's specifically teaching families about the importance of securing, locking guns and storing them locked and unloaded. And then Sandy Hook Promise, which is an organization that is more focused on and combating social isolation and team building in schools. So next slide, please. This is the American Academy of Pediatrics Gun Safety Toolkit. Shows a few of the different handouts that they have on their website. And the website URL is kind of cumbersome, so there's the QR code. These handouts are very easy to access, easy to download and distribute, and like I said, come in several different, at least in English and Spanish. The first one that got kind of buried there is about asking about firearms before a play date, which I think is just such a nice way to introduce the topic and make it, it's, most parents are a little bit nervous when their kids go on their first play date and ask about things like pets and pools and food allergies, and also just saying, hey, and if you have any guns, are they locked? It's just a nice way to introduce that topic. Next slide, please. Be Smart for Kids is also an excellent resource. Some of the things I wanted to highlight about this website in particular, they have some nice videos that are made, the smart conversations that are made with a couple of other community resources. They have a church that's involved with making them, and they're just examples of ways to talk about this topic with other families or with community members that I think can be helpful, because some people don't know exactly what to say. And this is a good resource to point families to for information as well. Next slide. And then Sandy Hook Promise, as I mentioned, is more focused, and I believe Concord School System has a lot of these programs in place. Community building, getting to know everyone, focusing on that, trying to eliminate kids who may feel socially isolated and allow the chance for kids to connect and speak up if they see something or hear something that is concerning. Okay, and that is it.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
So reel back. Thank you so much.
No problem.
I was nodding along the whole time you were talking because as a parent, I have struggled with how to initiate those conversations in a way that feels trusting, because it can be a sensitive topic.
Right.
But having resources and tools to have those conversations is so helpful. So thank you for bringing that to us.
I think also something, Cara, that I want to add is normalizing the conversation. So the
Yes.
more families that speak up, because it should be normalized, just like if, we were talking about food allergies, or if a pool is secure so the kids aren't using the pool unsupervised, having that as a normalization can be helpful.
I would say, probably one of the biggest things that I see is safe storage. The safe storage, most people all believe in safely storing, but we don't always do that. There are still a number of people who believe that if the gun is in the adult's closet and the ammunition is in the dresser drawer or the nightstand drawer, that they're all safe because the kids won't know that, but kids are super curious and they know everything. And so that's definitely a false sense of security. And I think getting that information to families will help them, because I think most families and most gun owners want to be safe and want to protect kids.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's, I grew up in a community that that hunting wasn't prevalent. It was much closer to a city. And now, as a mom, so many of my neighbors and friends are responsible gun owners who are, it's so great to connect with them. And we all share that goal. No one wants kids to get hurt, of course. And in fact, I think gun owners often know much more about it's the uncle who has a gun and doesn't think about it. It's those are the people I feel who are the best target, people who are not as acutely aware of how curious kids are, and also maybe not quite as invested in safety. Yeah.
And just the education on what secure storage
Exactly.
means, right? Some people feel that maybe it's secure, but it's not, by definition, securely stored.
Right.
And that's, really the perfect segue into why this is relevant to us, which is that as we look at how we can amend our current policy, how do we bring that educational element into, our weapons policy? Because it's not just necessarily saying don't bring guns, or don't, there is a health and education aspect to it that, if I think written well, that maybe we can actually make some headway here on bringing resources and access to our students and families on this topic. So,
And on that same note, I'm also interested what Concord Pediatrics is doing for secure gun storage and education, because since many of the students, I assume, use Concord Pediatrics in this area, to have some congruency with what is being educated on in the practice, as well as what we're also enforcing or encouraging.
yeah. Well, I think all we can really do in that arena is lead by example.
Right. No. But if there was a certain educational tool that might be familiar for
see what you're
families when they see in the pediatrician's office as well as in the school,
Right.
make
So you're
it
talking
more
about
comforting.
beyond policy.
Beyond policy.
If we set in policy that there should be an educational component
Correct.
to it,
Which we-
perhaps we have a recommendation which is consistent with what is happening elsewhere in town.
Do you hand out the gun safety toolkit to any of your patients' parents?
No, I have not handed out those documents. I discuss secure gun storage with families, but no, I haven't.
Okay. But those are the ones I saw in the presentation. I took them down, and they're available to the public to be able to download them.
Yep.
That's
It's
okay.
like, I wish the URL was a little bit easier, but I can send it out after too. If you're interested, I can send out the website so that you can go right on and see.
Okay. I did get the Be Smart for Kids or
Yep.
video, so that might be helpful too. But yeah, anything you think might be a good, obviously it can't be too long because we lose attention, but we're just looking for the right publication.
Yep.
Thank you.
We have a lot of means in which to get the information out. When I met with the principals, that was really the topic of discussion around the education piece of the policy. The rest of it was pretty supportive of the language that was in there. But for them, for the principals anyway, it's how do we get the message out, and how do we get that message at home? First of all, they supported it, of course. But we also have the ability to use our Concord TV, which is a great tool. So if there's a video or something like that, and we have permission to use it, I'm sure we would. And we also talked about different resources. I do a newsletter that comes out of the superintendent's office, and I always put resources, not a lot, because I don't want people to ignore it, but we'll put in a couple of resources that are helpful to families, and the principals do the same thing in their monthly newsletters. So we talked about doing that kind of education. How we deal with the kids, actual talking with the
Yeah,
kids,
it's tough.
we've got to look at that in terms of how that's presented to them, because that's a difficult, that's difficult. We really wanted to target more to the adults. And as you know, we're conflicted, right? Because we have this federal law about school safety with weapons, and yet we have state law that allows it. And The latest law that was passed last year allows people to have guns, teachers could have guns in their vehicles on the campus. We've had situations where we have had people come to an event at the school and were carrying, and when we were aware of that, we've been asking them to if they would, remove it and bring it and store it in their vehicle while they're on site. People have always been very cooperative. We've never had anybody say, hey, I have the right. We don't see that. But it is an issue that we are very sensitive to because our students are very sensitive to it. And in cases where they have seen somebody carrying a weapon during an event onto site, it did cause a lot of anxiety on the part of our students, and so we want to be pretty proactive with this.
I think the more information that we have available,
I agree.
Is helpful for all staff to also use the word secure storage. So in talking about asking people to leave their firearms in the vehicle, it should be securely stored in the vehicle as well.
So I would think, since we're in the early portions of this, I would like to ask Dr. Arno if she would continue to help us as we develop this policy. And Alfred, you have a tremendous amount of expertise and unfortunately experience with this situation, and so we very much appreciate your input.
Oh, yeah, of course. Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah.
And this is not directly related to this policy committee, but I applied for a grant to sort of continue to help with education in Concord and also Manchester, New Hampshire on this topic. And so I'm going to be at like National Night Out, and yeah, so I'll hopefully there will be other areas in the community that this can be emphasized also. And I know there's lots of volunteers, in town too.
So let us know how we can help you as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
So I'm going to, you have the policy in front of you. Feel free to read it. The thing that probably is going to be most relevant to what we're talking about is at the very end regarding safe weapon storage. Kathleen, do you want to just give us a full report of your conversation with the principals, or was that kind of it?
Right, it was really kind of it. We brought it up, and I try to bring policies when they're in development to them so that I could get input from them. And again, they were all supportive of it, wanted to know what. I think the biggest issue was the materials, because we vet all the materials that we use in school with the kids, or if we send it home to parents. So that process, obviously, we would vet it via a curriculum group and as they review materials. But I think that was their biggest issue. What are the materials? Where will they be accessed from? And Karen and I have already talked about that and where we could secure. And it was great to hear that your organization has some, so I wrote that down. So I'll reach out and we'll be able to look at those materials and pass it. But that was really the effort, their concern.
So my question then to the committee members, on page 2, under the new section, Safe Weapons Storage Education, it reads, given the high incidence of youth firearm accidents and death, the district is committed to reminding adults of secure firearm and ammunition storage, has the USC citation. Safe storage education will be provided to families along with written notice of this policy at least once a year. Do we think this language is sufficient in providing direction to the district on providing resources? Is it clear enough that we're not necessarily talking about classes directly to students about guns, we're talking about just making sure that resources are available and distributed, at least, it sounds like from this policy, at least once a year.
Right. The other thing that I failed to mention was that the principals would insert this policy into the parent-student handbook also. So that was another point we talked about at the principals meeting. We just automatically assume that, right? So, but yeah, we would put it in the policy.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. Go ahead. I was just going to ask, what information and education do we provide to our teachers and staff and people who are here on our campuses? This is great, giving some stuff to families, but I want anybody who's parking in our parking lots or on our properties to have an available information as well.
Well, like with any policy, when we bring these policies up in terms of the educators, in terms of the staff, we share that with them. We go over principals. Karen's really great about giving them a list of all of the policies that we want them to discuss when they have their opening meetings. Those meetings are around policy and making sure that staff understand that. The new teachers, when they come in, the onboarding that we do, Jim, that includes all the new policies that not just new policies, but existing policies, so that we go over that with them.
Yeah, and then
Uh,
the
you know,
facility.
it's interesting that you bring that up. One of the things that I've always been, we haven't done this, but there are policies that the people who use our facilities should know about.
It's in there, the facility usage policy.
Is this in there?
Remember one of the prohibitions, I'm thinking we had a no weapons policy?
Yeah.
And I'll go back and check it.
Will you check that? Because we want to make sure that people using our facilities understand the rules of using those facilities. And so we'll go back and check that. That was a
It is in
great
the
point,
policy.
Jim.
Yeah, I mean, and because we had conversations around how we can legally let people know what our policy is while also not undermining state law. So, you know, I think we did a good job of letting people know through the policy, which is to provided to all facilities users, that weapons are not permitted, and that, you know, law enforcement may be contacted if there's an issue.
Right, that was in our facilities use, but
Right.
not specific, does it specifically reference this policy? Because this one would have secure storage. So are we talking
No.
about having secure storage language? Is that what you're talking about, Mr. Ray?
I'm just looking to have as much information
Right.
to all of the people that will be on our campus. I would wonder, let's use that word, if I walked through any buildings and asked staff and, you know, administrators and teachers and all, you know, do you know what safe storage in your vehicle is? I don't know what response I would get. And not that people are not concerned about that safety, that they just don't know.
Right, and some of these toolkits, I know specifically for Be Smart, there are posters that you know, are simplified language. And visiting Oyster River School, it is posted. There's a Be Smart poster posted at the middle school when we were touring. So that is something, in simple language, just talking about asking, right? And that helps normalize the conversation with the kids too, that it's okay to ask.
The other thing I want to point out, since this is a public, you know, meeting, is that we are not anti-Second Amendment. We are not anti-gun. This has nothing to do with that. This is all about pro-kids and pro-safety, and that is our concern. I am a gun owner for almost my whole life. I have my family always has had guns, and one of the very first things we learned when we were, you know, 12 and teenagers and that type of thing was safety, and that's the key thing here. We want our kids safe. That's just basically it.
Right. And you know, we are in the education biz. You know, we can provide education around any manner of, you know, life's challenges, whether it's health and wellness, exercise, diet, study, you know, how to study, how to learn, how to, you know, all the things. This is just wrapped into that, in my opinion. So I don't really necessarily see it as a contentious issue. It's just
I would hope not.
a topic that we can bring light to in a proactive way in our schools. And I appreciate that, you know, it may differ from school to school, you know.
Correct.
That maybe Broken Ground may not think it appropriate for that age range, you know, and I want to give some flexibility there for our administrators, you know, to have discretion in what they post and what they talk about. But, you know, some sort of from the umbrella perspective of the policy, we're being permissive that these are educational opportunities that we encourage and supply to our district.
I think the only language in the policy that the principal struggled with a little bit, I guess we all did, was the lookalikes. What does that mean? You know, because I will say that sometimes we have students who will
Yeah.
bring in a fake gun or squirt gun or you know,
Right.
and it often can resemble something, and so the look-alike was a little bit of a challenge. We
Yeah.
talked about it quite a bit.
I'm looking it up right now. Is that an RSA? Is that what
Wasn't that in the
159?
RSA, Karen? The look-alike?
Well, it's in our policy.
But wasn't it in the RSA?
You mean as
Yeah,
far
I
as
have
the
that up
definition
somewhere.
goes?
Yeah, yeah.
That I can't tell you for sure.
This is 159.
It does say RSA 150. It's quoted after the list of weapons. But when I filled out my annual report on weapons in schools, because I have to provide that data to the Department of Ed, and I've never seen lookalikes on my report, but
Yeah.
certainly some of these others I have. Not to the degree though, like Billy Club, that's not on there.
I mean,
Stilettos.
look-alike to me is intuitive, but it's not necessarily something I could define. It's a weapon that looks like a weapon.
Yeah.
It's a theater
Right.
knife. It's a play gun that looks like a gun.
Right.
And if
And I
it's-
won't tell you that we haven't probably seen some of those with
Yeah.
little guys who stick them in their book bags or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So we have to handle that in a way that is an educational opportunity for the youngster.
Right. And we had talked about this at the last meeting, which is that the way the language is written is you have a lot of discretion here as the superintendent. You are not required to expel a child for a year
Right.
because they bring a toy gun to
Right.
class.
Right.
But it's in policies so that you can have that educational talk with them, that
It kind of follows your belief in restorative practices, doesn't it? I mean, we try not to, we know that sending kids home from school and suspending them and not in the learning environment for X amount of days has really netted a zero gain for anybody. Doesn't change behaviors and it doesn't help them academically. So restorative practices, to me, when a youngster does things like that, this is the opportunity. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't other consequences that go along with it, because every situation is different.
yeah.
But I appreciate the flexibility that it gives our principals. They're the ones that are trying to deal with these policies and making determinations. And no work is black and white. Our work is not black and white.
No, I would think that common sense would be applied in all situations.
There is some black and white, by the way. I don't want anybody to think there
Yes.
isn't. There are some occasions I can think of that, but
Yes.
for the most part, our work tends to be in the gray.
Yes, I think someone brings a Nerf gun, then
Yeah.
you're gonna have a discussion, but I don't
Yeah.
think we're gonna consider that a
Right.
serious violation.
Right, but I mean, I've had situations where a little boy or girl was out with their mom and dad over the weekend, and I've seen a knife while they were fishing, and the knife was in the book bag as part of the, just carrying out to wherever they were going, and lo and behold, it didn't get taken out, and it's brought into school, so that's when parents are really helpful too, because they can help us with that.
Yeah, context matters. And, to that point, we're not, we're talking about education around firearms and safe storage, but this policy covers like the full breadth of what could be considered a weapon. And so much of that is intent. Like accidentally bringing your fishing knife is very different than wielding a weapon in order to threaten. So, there is context, under this policy that will be required. So Kathleen, in terms of after your discussion with principals, do you have any recommendations for further changes in language?
No, again, we talked a little bit about expulsion, because that is in there, and, again, that's a very difficult consequence. You've not employed that since I've been here. There's always been alternatives to that. But whether we expel somebody or whether you expel, because you're the one that had the authority to do it, not me.
You,
And
meaning the board. You're
The
pointing
board,
at me. but
yeah, I meant the board. The
Like,
board in
it's not
general,
my
not this,
idea.
not even this committee. The
Okay.
full board,
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
has that authority to do that. No one else, which is really a good practice. But you also know that we have a responsibility to educate that youngster. So when expulsion occurs, we still have a responsibility to provide alternative education for that student.
Okay.
Just so you know that, and we talked about that as the principals talked about that too. So I think this is ready to go. I think, Karen, is there anything else you and I I'm trying to think, we went over this
We
again
talked
this
about it,
morning.
although as I'm sitting here looking, as we've done in previous policies, I'm wondering after, we put the purpose of the policy here, which is, hey, prohibiting weapons, if we might not want a definition section, because now we have the term weapon, we're using martial arts, we're using self-defense, and a secure gun storage or safety device, which I think is really helpful back here on the second page, but it comes right at the end, it doesn't really blend in. Whereas I think if we can define those terms early on, it might make more sense to the reader.
Yep. So what I would propose is, because like I said, this is it's almost like a pre-draft.
Okay. Yep.
That between now and the next meeting, I will commit to creating a first reading draft that is based on the language that is included here. I will add a purpose statement at the beginning, as is typical of our policies. I'll add numbering so that it is formatted within our sort of general style guide. I'm going to include a definition section for weapon that will align with the RSA. So if lookalikes is in the RSA, I'm going to include it here. It is what it is. As well as we have a definition for secure gun storage or safety device, which I think I had provided before, so I can add that.
Yep.
I can't think of really any other definitions we would need.
You might want to define, under the RSA, they'll probably give it to you, self-defense weapons and martial arts weapons. Because they got added to the legal references.
Yeah, well, I
But
think,
they're still weapons.
yeah, I think I kind of like,
Yeah, but nunchucks are a specific martial art weapon that a lot of kids will get into if they're taking like judo or whatever, not judo, but that kind of stuff. So I think it's just fair to put as much notice in as we can.
I'll look into it. I mean, I kind of like what Liz did here in terms of kind of keeping it simple. Martial arts weapons, I would probably expand it to say as defined in RSA 159.24, and self-defense weapons as defined in RSA 159.20. But if it's not that much longer, I'm happy to add it as additional definitions within the section. And then I believe we'd had a conversation about the 1 year versus 12 months thing in our last meeting, so I'll
Yeah.
rewatch the tape and see what we decided there. Is there any other changes that anyone would like to see before I bring this as a first reading draft?
So are you going to bring this back to this committee or first reading draft to the board?
So I don't consider this a first reading draft that we
Okay.
can move tonight.
Okay.
Because it's not
Right,
ready to
it's
go.
got everything in
Yeah.
it, but it doesn't, yeah.
Exactly. So all
Not
the pieces
formatted.
of the puzzle are there, but
Yeah.
they're just not fully
Okay.
together. So I will go ahead and put those puzzle pieces together so that we have something that we can move to the full board. So we'll see this one more time.
Okay.
It'll be nice
That's
and
good.
clean. It won't have the stuff in the margins.
I have one question, the last
Yes.
sentence.
Mhm.
Safe storage education be provided to families along with written notice of this policy at least once a year.
Mhm.
Are we okay with just saying that it'll be provided to families, or do we want to have some education to staff, or
Safe storage education.
Do we want to do something like education in the facilities, like a link to education and facilities policy for safe storage?
How about safe storage, education, and resources will be provided to families, staff, and facilities users. Facility users.
So we would hand it out to them when they applied, or?
We probably
I'm
put it
just-
online with all the applications.
Yeah, I'm just
Yeah.
throwing it out there.
Yeah.
Whether
No,
we
I
want to
agree.
do that or not, I don't know.
You know, I'm the one who brought up the staff.
Right.
Earlier,
Well, and I
so
think
I would
that's
agree.
broad enough that it still gives the district discretion on how to execute that.
Right.
But the policy says that safe storage, education, and resources will be provided on some level to families, facility users, and staff, along with written notice of this policy. I might suggest an amendment to say that this policy shall be included in all student handbooks.
Yeah,
Because it sounds like that's what you're gonna do anyway.
yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
it's on the list.
Yeah, I'd agree to that change. I think that's good.
I think that's a good change.
Okay. Dr. Arsenault, do you have any other comments, suggestions, thoughts, takeaways?
No,
Okay.
thank you for having me, and
Thank
you have my
you.
contact information, and feel free to reach out. Yeah, thank you.
Great, thanks so much.
Thank you
Thank you
so
very
much
much
for
for
coming.
coming.
All right, with that, unless anybody has any further questions or comments, I'm going to close the discussion on the weapons policy so that we can move on to policy 161. Great. All right. Have a great night.
Drive carefully, thank you.
Karen, do you want to take us through what we have in our packet here?
Well, I wanna bring this up. We do not have, unfortunately, I made changes to 161 in light of what I briefed last time, and I can rebrief exactly what I briefed. But Kara, I know you said in a note earlier that you hadn't had a chance either to go and include yours, so does it
Yeah.
make sense that maybe we hold to get the right, to get 161? Unfortunately, it's not in your package. I'm sorry about that.
No,
Didn't you
that's-
make a copy of it?
I did, but that's the one from last time that you gave. It's not
Right.
the one I gave Bridget this morning where I made the changes we talked about. I took out some reference to to harassment with regard to 415 since that whole 415, Title IX was the second 2024 version was vacated. And then I updated some of the references. So I did put some work into it. As I said, unfortunately, what you have is you have that first final draft. That's the one we went over, the last time. But then I took it, I made the changes, made a clean draft.
Right,
did
and
it.
that's, so I said in my email to you guys, full disclosure, I hadn't worked on the continuing amendments to 161 because we weren't sure if this
Right.
committee was going to
Right.
be
Yep.
You don't need to explain
this
it.
committee anymore. I apologize.
No.
But as it turns out, it's us again together.
We're back.
For 2025. All of our membership stayed the same. And so I also, maybe we should take one further step back and just brief as a group how the current administration has impacted the work that we've been doing, because we had been working on 415 and 161 sort of in tandem. So Karen, could you kind of expand on that a little bit, how changes or lack thereof to 415 have impacted our
Sure.
other policies?
Well, the good news is our policy that is online and current is the 2020 version because we had
For
worked
415,
really
yeah.
hard to update that to the 2020 and all the changes. But since the 2024 version was vacated and we're going back to that, the impact on the following policies is fairly minimal, to be honest with you. 161, is the Non-Discrimination, Equal Opportunity and Anti-Discrimination Plan. So anytime it talked about the Title IX policy with regard to discrimination and sexual discrimination and then harassment, which I always got confused about the sexual harassment. I took out the reference there, and then again in the legal references section at the end of 161 and then 161.1, which we'll get to, I went ahead and used the current version, which is the 2020 version. So there were some name changes, believe it or not,
Yeah.
in the names of the policy. So I think I have, those were the big changes. But as far as do we still need the 161 and then the 161.1, my guidance to the committee would be yes, we do.
Okay.
So we're in good shape there because we have them.
Okay, so just to recap, we are no longer going to be working on amendments to policy 415 as it relates to the Biden administration's changes to Title IX that updated a lot of definitions and process. So all of that is just sort of tabled currently. We still need to do updates to policies 161, 161.1 regarding discrimination in employment because that's still relevant, right?
Correct.
And then there were some peripheral policies like,
Yes, the plan to
Yeah.
161, which
Yeah.
is done, which would still be applicable. And then we have the annual contacts that are
Right.
required,
Mhm.
which is now Appendix A.
Mhm.
Okay, and then we have 161.1, which is the discrimination and harassment grievance procedure for types of harassment outside of the 415, so other kinds. So it's sort of your catch-all.
okay. And
So-
what about the, like, pregnancy?
Yep, we still have that,
Okay.
that's still applicable.
Mm-hmm.
And so when
Lactation.
we get to it,
Lactation.
and lactation, so we have
Mhm.
528, 528.1, and then the follow-on, I have them, we just haven't worked on them, they're ready to go. So it'd be 528, 528.1, and, sorry, 528.2.
Okay. And I apologize, I'm having a brain freeze. I've seen them, but have we discussed them in committee?
No.
No, okay.
No, they were put in the folder a couple, long time ago.
I know,
We
I was like,
just-
I know I've seen them,
You have.
but I can't remember if we discussed.
We just put them
Yes.
in there because we knew we were headed down that
Yeah.
path, so you'd have them, but we never got to them.
Okay, so it sounds like those need to be added to the agenda.
Correct.
So I think we can expect to see those the next policy meeting, because it sounds like they're ready to go, we're ready to review them.
Correct.
It's just time to do the work. Okay, great, so we'll add those to the agenda for next time. And then why don't you go ahead, looks like we've got the anti-discrimination plan in our packet here, and then 161.1 First Street draft.
Correct. So I just commend to you all, we went through the plan last time.
Mhm.
I made the changes that were requested. And so, for example, let me point it out here if I can show you. Nope. Damn, I don't know what happened here today. Anyway, what we did is, as you recall, we had the conversation about putting the, what we decided to call Appendix A, which is your annual notice of contact information for district and outside agencies as well. I separated them from being inside the plan, and we decided last time that the plan will just follow the policy. And then, aside from the policy, then you'll have, the plan, then you'll have Appendix A, which is, so those have been prepared for you.
Looks great.
Page 1 obviously is the district assets, and then the back on page 2 is the outside agencies. So,
One of the things that you asked too is that the plan be posted along with other plans, like we have a suicide plan as an example, that we would post them so that families could see them right up front on the website. So I'll work with Terry to figure out a way to make sure we have that easily accessible to folks who use it. Okay.
Great, thank you.
There were other plans we talked about, right? We talked about, in addition to the suicide.
suicide prevention plan,
Right.
the joint loss committee plan.
Joint loss, right.
So
That was
those
the
are,
other one,
those
right.
3, so those 2 additional items have been provided to you, although I am looking at the back, having said to you that I'm looking at the legal references, which I'm trying to find, on the back of, where did you see?
The back of the plan?
No, it isn't on the back of the plan, never mind. I think I'm starting to see things.
161?
No, the related policies on page 2 and
Oh,
on page 3 of the plan.
Yep.
I'm hoping. Board policy 415 still has the Title 9 prohibition, sex discrimination, sex-based harassment
yeah.
policy.
We'll have to
It should be in fact the title of the older policy. And that is just sexual harassment reporting grievance process.
Yep.
So that is a change.
What a mess, I'm sorry, guys.
No.
I know,
That's
all the work you had to do to lean in, and now we gotta lean out.
Yeah. So other than that,
Yep.
those were the 2 accompanying documents. And as we talked about, the plan has to be reviewed by the board biannually, so every 2 years. And they say, in between the suicide prevention plan, but that's not
And
dictated.
that biannual review is in policy 161?
It is.
Okay.
Yep, I can
I'll
tell
just-
you, it's in, where it talks about the actual plan itself on page, I believe it's page, let me find it, 161.
Just add it.
Did you
There
find
it
it,
is.
Kathleen?
No, I got it.
Oh, sorry, okay, 161, grievance. It's on page 4, it's Roman numeral 7.
Great.
And then it talks at the very bottom of that section, no less than every 2 years. off years from the review of the district's suicide prevention plan. The superintendent shall update the plan and present it to the board in time for budget consideration.
There are other plans that I have to do that. For instance, one of the things that we're gonna probably review here and then bring to the board again is data governance. It has to be done annually too.
Yeah, okay. Great.
I think the key will be keeping track of all these things.
Yeah,
So, to come up with a
a review schedule.
That is the conundrum.
Yeah. Just a couple of notes on 161.1. I don't know why this is our style policy, but it is that for some reason we never provide the purpose statement isn't included in the formatting and the numbering. It always just like lives on its own. So we would have to remove that Rome 1 if we're being consistent. In the paragraph under Rome 2, we've misspelled SAU8.org.
Yeah, so.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and then for
Where was that?
Oh, and,
161.1,
Yeah.
yeah, middle of the paragraph for Rome 2.
where you have the site to the SAU website.
Website.
Oh,
The
okay.
A got left off. And I did do some research, Jim, on your question about 504 ADA, which should come first. And the wording I got back was ADA should come first. It should be ADA 504 because ADA is more comprehensive, it's actually more current, and it's tied to federal funding. Those are the 3 reasons given. So,
Good, and we've made it consistent.
yes, I
Thank you.
tried to throughout the policy. I changed them all. So it was consistently wrong the last time. So this time I think we're consistent.
Goals for
and correct.
2025. Consistency.
It's okay, I'm happy that we, were able to come back and change it.
And then I highlighted on what you have in front of you, the changes. We hadn't gone through 161, the first 161.1, the first redraft.
Right.
So I did go back there, and as you can see, I eliminated the sex-based harassment under the second paragraph
Yeah.
on the first page. And then, the changes are all provided as we go along. I think they're self-explanatory, but and then, of course, we had changed the appendix numbers, so they've been changed back to A.
Can I ask in Rome 3B
Yeah, 3B, let me catch
on
up
page
with you.
2,
Yep,
you had taken out the sex-based harassment because 415 was retracted. Does potential sex discrimination, that term, is that still relevant?
it is because sexual harassment is a form of sex discrimination.
And that is true in the 2020 as
Correct.
well? Okay, great.
Yes.
I just want to make sure. Wonderful. And then I would say we'll just need some further numbering. Like we've got some things that have paragraph numbers, but others don't. So it's okay. I'm happy to add those.
Can we look at page 5 at the top, when
Sure.
we talked about the investigator shall conduct a prompt, impartial, adequate, and reliable and
Yes, I
thorough.
put that in
Let's-
green,
yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
The reason I
will
did it
go
is
over
when I
that.
was,
Thank you.
when I was looking at the go-by, I was like, I had some problems with it because I thought adequate and thorough. Adequate means you're gonna do the bare minimum, in my opinion. And thorough means you're gonna do more than the bare minimum. And
kinda
I just,
go against.
I just bring that to your attention to see if we should, I would recommend getting rid of adequate and do thorough.
Happy to.
Yeah.
I mean, this is
I
this
had
is
a
your process. So if
Right.
you have plans
Yes.
to do more than the adequate,
Yeah.
then I'm happy to remove it.
And we
Unless anyone
find-
would like to.
No, I
don't
agree.
really know
Let's-
what they meant by adequate there, I agree with you. It's,
And you know,
it's in the school board association policy, but I
Yeah.
don't know what is meant by that to you, I can't.
But it's
Well, it
weird.
just throws confusion into thorough, in my
Yeah.
opinion. Let's just stick
Yeah,
with
get rid
thorough.
of
You have
Because
board
that's what I
members-
think we would like to have.
You
But
have
it
board
was
members
really-
who don't like the word adequate or adequacy.
Yeah.
So I think we get rid of it.
Mm-hmm.
But what's interesting is if you go to page 7 under Roman numeral 7, and you go down to the swoosh, I guess it's all one line, that paragraph, the first one at the top of the page, will conduct a prompt, impartial, reliable, and thorough. So they weren't consistent in their word, they're carrying it over. So I think that's.
Prompt, impartial, reliable, thorough. Prompt, impartial, reliable, thorough. Yeah, that works.
So,
Mm-hmm.
I if you don't mind, if I can run through 161.1 and
Yeah,
just brief it
yeah.
real quick.
We're
with
jumping
some
around a
comments.
little bit, so why don't we go ahead and just, I think we've all seen it.
Yep.
So we don't have to drill down
You should
necessarily.
probably recognize the process because it's very, very similar to the 415 to sexual harassment. But still. Okay. So basically, we start out what it is. There's the restatement in paragraph 1 that we're committed to maintaining. So there's our restatement. In our admissions, our treatment, our employment, and its programs, services, activities, and facilities. When I thought about admissions, I thought, I wonder, but we have CRTC, and that's a selection process, so that would be an admissions. So we should include that. And then it makes it clear in the second paragraph that it's for illegal discrimination, harassment, retaliation not addressed by other board policies. Okay, so, and then we give an example, while race and ethnic-based harassment could be addressed through this process, then sex discrimination, you'd go to 415, and what you're going to see further on is, and in many cases, sex-based discrimination and other things can also look like bullying. So what's clear is we're going to address it through another district policy if it doesn't clearly fit within here, okay, whatever the behaviors. Down to paragraph 3 on the first page, this is just giving a little bit of guidance on the fact that we can take care of behavior on school or school-sponsored events or activities that we're in charge of, but we have to be careful. We'll still do our due diligence, we'll look into it, but we can only take action on where we have legal authority to do so. At first, I was sort of offended by that line. I was like, I thought it was redundant, the first and second sentence, but there is a standard with regard to, and the best example I can give you are kids who are on their devices late at night, at home. They're not using their school devices, they're using their personal devices, and they're bullying each other or they're sexually harassing each other online, okay? Now, because they're off school property, it's not a school event, and they're not using one of our devices, technically, we don't have to address that. However, the language then goes on to say in our policy, unless it causes a substantial disruption to the educational process. Well, when they all come to school the next day, and then the fight breaks out, or they know so-and-so sent me this, then we do get involved. So I just, I think it's important to leave it there, but also I wanted to explain to you all that we do our due diligence. We probably even go further than is required, but we've got assistant principals at the high school, and they'll jump right on that kind of behavior.
Good.
I have a question, and don't get me wrong, I'm just not sure, but it's just a weird thing that we address discrimination, harassment, and retaliation that negatively impact the education. Is there ever a chance where we positively impact it? Do we really even need negatively in there? Just say impact. Because I can't think of positive discrimination, harassment, and retaliation.
Well, I do think, not to get too in the weeds, but there is the potential for neutral impact.
Okay, I'm fine with the negatively in there. I'm just.
Right.
Just seems like an odd.
Your statement is common sense, right? I appreciate.
I'm fine. I don't need to change anything.
I guess it wouldn't be reported if it wasn't negative.
Right.
I'm fine with leaving negatively in there. I'm just thinking, is that necessary? But let's just leave it as it is, since it's probably in the other.
Good point.
Well, and it could be one of the elements I'm looking at is what's this impact been? Did you
Yeah.
drop a course? Did you refuse? Did you drop off the athletic team?
Okay.
Whatever it is.
That's fine. That's fine.
That's easier to define. So, under Roman numeral 2, this is the language hopefully y'all are fairly familiar with, and it just differentiates. A report can be made by anybody. It talks about the ways you can report, and we do all kinds. We sometimes get emails. This is our see something, say something, telephone calls, messages, whatever. And so then what happens is once a report is made, and the different ways are defined, then sometimes that most times it turns into a complaint. And the complainant is more limited. Usually that's either the victim who sustained the harassment or the discrimination, or their guardian or parent. Okay, so that paragraph just walks through exactly, okay, what's a report, what's a complaint. Then we get into the informal process, and that just further defines both John Fabrizio and myself, one as the title coordinator, and he's the ADA 504 compliance, and goes down, and it says, you should contact me under A, B, C, and D, unless it's an education and disability, which you read about in C, and then you go to the ADA 504 coordinator. If it's not somebody, if their harassment doesn't involve a protected class, then basically you're probably talking more of the bullying, which can involve protected classes, obviously, but many times they'll report that to the principal instead of to me, and then they'll do a bullying investigation. And then, of course, so those policies are highlighted there as to those, what we would do, or what the policies would be for bullying, and then 161. And then you go down to the policy. If a student, it just allows students, even though we want them to come and report to the right people, it's just important they report to a trusted adult. That could be a school counselor, that can be a teacher, building principal, an employee, it can even be a volunteer. And then we go on and say, or a witness. And if a witness sees it, they're supposed, it says you should report the alleged acts to me. And then we use that language again, talking about employees and volunteers. They have to report the conduct as soon as possible, but not later than the end of the next school day or work day. School or work day. The next
Volunteers
school or work day.
receive this as part of their training, right?
Yes.
Volunteers.
I did a training video that's online.
Okay, great.
And they're supposed to report. It always.
Great.
Yeah. Yep.
As long as they're clear on their reporting responsibility.
Okay, definition section, it just outlines some of the terms in the policy, so I won't repeat those unless y'all have any questions, but I changed the appendix A from B, so that's more current. Then you go down to Roman numeral 5, and it talks about, and I hope this never happens, when you begin a report or a complaint it's a complaint that will start the formal grievance process. But if the complaint is against either me as the Title IX coordinator or John Fabrizio as the ADA 504 coordinator, then Kathleen as the superintendent or her designee would then obviously would appoint alternates who assume the duties there. As I say, I hope that never happens, but I am going to append the district complaint form, which is talked about at the top of page 4 as an appendix to the policy. It's already on my SAU web page, but I think it's important just to put it behind the policy in case they want to just go right to it. Okay, it's fillable on my web page. So that's the one difference. They can just do one-stop shopping. And then it goes on to say that I, as the Title IX coordinator, I'm going to, obviously written, documented complaints are much better, one for record keeping and everything else. So I'm available to offer assistance to help prepare, to summarize an oral complaint into a written complaint, whatever they need. But if they ultimately refuse and say, I don't want to make either an oral or a written, I don't want you to summarize my oral into a written, then we still have to do our due diligence and investigate what we know from the oral complaint. Okay? And then I review it, just like I do for a Title IX, just to see, does it fall within, the parameters, do the analysis of, does it look like it does constitute discrimination, harassment, or whatever else. Then we go down to the third paragraph on page 4, and we talk about, if you're going to complain outside of the school district, which is your right, you can do them both at the same time. You can just go to OCR. You have to do it, and I list the time frames, and it's 180 days or the date the complainant could reasonably have become aware of the occurrence. Then you go down, and you'll see this a lot in the different stages where it talks about the complainant. If the person making the complaint, known as the complainant, is under 18, then we have to notify parents or guardians. Then the next paragraph obviously talks about, I shouldn't say obviously, talks about what's going to be looked at. I look at the surrounding circumstances, the nature of the behavior, the relationships of the parties, any past incidents, and then the context in which the incident occurred. Now, one thing here that I noticed, and we lay out the standard, which is a preponderance of the evidence standard. That's consistent across the district. That's what we use for all of our administrative. So it's more likely than not, or a 51% probability that the facts are as alleged or are not as alleged, okay? Are, supported by the evidence, if you will. So, then going down to the investigation and initial determination. This is one place in here I saw. The Title IX coordinator will initiate an impartial investigation within 5 days. Throughout the rest of the policy, you're going to see they say working days. So I recommend we insert working days before 5, just to stay consistent. And so we look at the facts, I analyze them, and I say, okay, does this look like it's a complaint? And I have to do that within 5 working days. Okay, let's see. And then if for some reason, the best example I can give you in the second sentence in that paragraph is, let's say I have a bias or I have a conflict of interest with the person, the complainant, maybe it's my daughter. Obviously, I shouldn't be the investigator. So in that case, we can look to other investigators. It might be something much more technical than I can handle, so obviously Kathleen can appoint a specialist or a third-party investigator. So that just lays out the permission there. Going to the top of page 5, we already talked about the word choices there, strike adequate. Then on the second paragraph, you'll see within 30 working days. Okay, there has to be a written report that summarizes and whether the facts substantiate a violation by preponderance of the evidence, and then any recommended corrective action. Okay. Again, the next line repeats the information that if they're under 18, if the victim's under 18, I'm sorry, not on that one, but if the complainant and the victim, if it's someone other than the victim who filed a complaint, and the respondents will be notified simultaneously. And I added that because it was in the 415, and I think that's important. And we'll probably always do a return receipt requested by U.S. Post mail, so we can show actual notice of having received it. Yeah. But the reason I put that in there is we always want to push send at the same time as close as possible, so one doesn't feel like.
We've talked about that.
Yep.
Yeah.
We can do an extension of the investigation period if necessary. We just need to make sure that we notify all the parties, the complainant and the respondent, in writing if a deadline is extended. Okay, again, it's consistent with what we do. And
Can I ask you a question?
sure.
So, on the second paragraph,
Second paragraph
of that page that we were just on,
Page
that
5.
you just,
4 or
the-
5?
Right, within 30 working days, the one that starts
Yep.
that
Thank
one. Okay? If someone other than the Title IX coordinator served as the investigator, the Title IX coordinator will receive the report and either adopt the report as submitted or modify or complete the report upon further investigation. That, of course, would not happen
If I
if
was
you
the-
were the...
Correct.
That's the
saw
only
that
thing I
earlier.
wanted. I don't know if that has to be mentioned or anything,
I think
but
it should be right. So long as it's not the Title IX is not the subject of the complaint.
right, because
So-
we mentioned
or a
it
conflict of
previously.
interest
Right.
for that matter. I
Hmm.
mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you wouldn't be the one to
No.
adopt the report if there was a conflict of interest.
Right. So I know we mentioned it previously
I
when
think
they
so.
appoint the investigator, but I don't know if it should be mentioned here or not. But it just struck me as
No, I agree with you.
What would be good recommended language?
So, we'll receive the report and either adopt the report as submitted or modify and complete the report upon further investigation and review of the political, as long as,
Like
there's no conflict
accept
or
that.
I was gonna
Yeah,
say,
yeah.
accept that.
Yeah.
in which case it would be the superintendent
Right.
Correct.
is what I would.
It would go
put in
directly.
there.
Yeah.
And
All right.
you can wordsmith it as you wish, but it just seems to be, to make it complete compared to the beginning of this.
No, I
thought it
think-
Right,
was-
no, it makes sense. So it could be, well, that's a super run-on sentence, so I maybe
Yeah.
won't do and accept that. But, however, the superintendent will receive the report for adoption if the Title IX coordinator is the subject of the complaint or
Or the
Yeah.
ADA
Has
50.
something.
No, it would just,
Or
it'd
has
be
a
okay with the
conflict.
504, with the ADA 504, because that's, yep, I can review that
Should
one.
be like, yeah, in the case where,
Oh, yeah, in the case.
might
Yeah,
be
we
the
could
way you
mimic
would
that
do that
earlier language
somewhere in
where,
there. I just think it's more
Right.
complete.
In the
if we did
case
it.
of conflict of interest
Mhm.
or
the Title IX coordinator is
Or
the
subject
subject of the
to- yeah.
investigation.
Mm-hmm.
then the superintendent shall
Subject to
receive the
I
report.
hope not.
Yep. Okay, then on level 2, on page 5, that's basically just the appeal. We start the appeal process, and all that says is, within 5 working days after receiving the level 1 decision, the complainant and victim, or the parent or the guardian, they can appeal, or the respondent, may appeal the investigator's decision to the superintendent, but they have to do it in writing. And then she will impartially review the matter, or she could designate somebody else to do it, if necessary. And then it lays out the next time frame, which is 10 working days, to complete the written decision on the appeal, okay? And stating whether or not, there's a violation of the district policy, what corrective actions would be implemented. Now, in that case, if she just approved if she looked at it and said, I don't believe there's anything, in the appeal, she could just say denied or whatever else, but, if she doesn't conduct the appeal, she still gets to review and sign the report. Let's say Kim Yolet's acting because Kathleen was off doing something. Kathleen would still be the one to review and sign it. And then it's supposed to go back to the investigator just to take a look at and make sure that the facts are consistent. And within 5 working days, it then has to be released simultaneously to the parties, the notifications of what the appeal decision is.
Karen, could we modify these headers to say level 2 appeal to the superintendent and then level 3 appeal to the
Yeah,
school
they're both
board?
the same.
Sure.
That's a good point.
Just so that we're understanding sequentially.
Yep.
Yeah,
The
who's
level 1 is the investigation.
Sure.
The level 2 is the appeal to the superintendent, and the level 3. So they're not like different levels of investigation, they're just different levels of path. It's just pathway.
Correct.
Okay, thank
And
you.
then level 3, of course, would be to the school board.
Right.
So you would have 5 days, the board would have 5 working days after receiving the level 2 decision to take a look at it.
Would
Once you
that
get the
be
written.
the full school board, or would it be policy? As a matter of hearings?
I think it would be policy. I don't know, Kathleen, in your experience, have you ever had a full board sit on an appeal, or is it just normally the policy committee?
My experience has always been a full board.
Really?
Mm,
Huh,
Yeah,
okay.
but there aren't a lot of school boards that
pretty
have
rare.
communication and policy committees.
Mhm.
So lots of times policy happens right at a board meeting, so you don't have a
Right.
separate committee, that's all
Right.
I'm saying.
Okay.
I mean, I
Um,
think in this particular instance, if something were to rise to that level, there'd probably be enough community hubbub that the full board would probably
Yeah.
want to have that impartial review. I don't know if it could be impartial at that point, but
Or what you could do is say, you know what, we don't really want to look at this, we're going to hire an outside hearing officer.
yeah,
And you
Mm.
can
is that an
and that's
option?
right in there.
Can we just
Well,
write that right now?
That's
It's
kind
there.
of what the
Yeah.
Department of Ed does, they
Mhm.
hire hearing officers to hear those.
Yep, so that last sentence gives you that discretion,
Mhm.
15 days, you can decide whether to hear or submit it to an outside. And then the board or the hearing officer has 30 working days to issue a written decision. And then, they have to be notified within 5 days after you all reach your decision, 5 working days. Simultaneously.
It looks like the school board has 15 days, not working days, which I'm
We should
comfortable
insert
with, but,
Yeah, it should be working,
Okay.
it should be
'Cause you
consistent,
don't wanna, yeah.
yeah. Can always do less if you get it done in time, but it's nice to have,
Yeah.
you know.
and
3
when we're
weeks.
talking about working days, like if something happens right before February break,
Right, the calendar
Mhm.
would otherwise keep, it's
Okay.
not a working day because it's a school
Okay.
vacation, so
Great.
we'd go by the school calendar.
Okay.
A snow day, for example, wouldn't count.
So it's 15 school days.
Well,
well, I
or
want to be
work.
careful there because if we're not in
Mhm.
school, if it happens
So
over
that's what I just thought I
Usually,
heard.
Yeah.
they consider if the central office is open. That's
I was
Okay,
gonna say, I
okay.
consider that a working day if
Okay,
if central's
central
open.
office is working.
Okay.
okay, thank you.
Okay. Then under paragraph 6, it just lays out the confidentiality agreement. We don't discuss who the complainants, victims, respondents, or witnesses are unless, required by law or policy, and that normally means a judicial order, subpoena, or parents of each. And then we make appropriate reports. Let's say we had a neglect or an abuse situation, obviously DCYF, or potentially we might have to notify the Concord Police Department. Next page, at the top of 7, district actions in absence of a formal complaint. Just basically says even if they don't file a complaint, and this is the same as in the 415 current version that we're going by, if I look at that and I feel like, you know what, this student's been involved, maybe I see a pattern or whatever else, or it looks like it could be substantiated, even if the person doesn't want to go forward, we still can do our due diligence and do an investigation. And I would then get together with the building principal, the superintendent, and we'd talk about any kind of supportive measures that might have to be put in effect, remedies, disciplinary consequences, so on and so forth. Okay. Under the next paragraph, 5, 6, 7, 8, the interim or supportive measures. I have 2 recommendations. They're the same one, but in different places. We always talk about taking immediate action to protect the alleged victims. And then I inserted and alleged respondents where appropriate, because just being accused of something like this sometimes can, and obviously we don't establish or substantiate until we complete the investigation.
Yeah.
So
I think we discussed that before.
Yeah,
I think we're
my
fine with
recommendation
that.
is we include immediate action to protect the alleged victims, and respondents. And then the same thing, in the next sentence, it talks about retaliation. We'll take immediate steps to prevent retaliation against the alleged victims, and or the complainants, any person associated. But I would say, I would put in respondent right after victims, since there are primary parties there. Okay. So I think that was it. Going down under consequences and remedies, it's pretty straightforward, I think.
I mean, it's pretty
Students-
It's pretty permissive in terms of a violation of this policy may result in
Yep.
certain disciplinary actions.
And it applies to, employees, students, contractors, volunteers, and then it talked about people on the property, and we could order, and Kathleen could issue a no contact, but, and then if we needed to, we could also contact law enforcement for court order to enforce this policy when necessary.
Yeah.
So that could be
Well,
more of a,
Can we run through a scenario real quick, a hypothetical?
yeah,
If a contractor, a visitor, a volunteer violated this policy, they were found in violation
Yep.
of a discrimination policy, should we not be more forthright that there are consequences? Is our only avenue to prohibit them from coming onto district property?
no, volunteers can instantly become non-volunteers.
Right.
Contractors can be
Removed.
removed. So we can say, if you want to be more specific, we could say,
I don't think we have a lot of ability for a volunteer or a contractor to really take action. If it were an employee, that's
Right.
different.
Yeah, we
Right,
can't,
when you
the only
have-
thing you can do is a no trespass, really.
Right.
Or call CPD, because we're not gonna have jurisdiction, administratively over,
With discrimination, I mean, I could call the Department of Ed because it's considered a violation of the code of conduct, so that's different. Holding a certification, an employee, that would be different, but I don't have any leverage when it comes to volunteers. And with contractors, you just dismiss that contract,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Well, but that's not
Volunteer.
what the policy explicitly states is that contractors, visitors, volunteers, or others who violate this policy may be prohibited from entering district property or otherwise restricted while on district property. So that's the only detail that we offer in terms of consequences for.
So you're saying she used the word will be prohibited from?
Well, I'm
Right,
just
she wants to add another
number one. I'm
level.
saying because we have a specific example of what could happen to them, it's by process of elimination. We're not addressing the other things the other potential actions that could be taken. So I feel like maybe we should at least address those, like, you know, that they may be subjected to
Dismissal.
Dismissal removal as a volunteer.
removal.
Yeah.
And, or, loss of,
Termination of contract.
yeah,
Yeah, I
Lots
feel
of-
like that might be
right.
worth listing, just because.
Or a lawsuit, I don't know.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's the thing, is because of this statement is vague enough
circumstances are so
that.
different for every case.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm just curious, do we want to be more, I would want to be slightly more specific.
So you're saying may be prohibited from entering district property, comma, and
Be
then list them?
dismissed or terminated.
Yeah, may be dismissed, terminated, or otherwise, I don't want to use the word sanctioned, but where's my thesaurus?
Mm-hmm.
You know, there are other avenues.
May be prohibited, dismissed, terminated.
Prohibited, dismissed, terminated, or otherwise addressed by the superintendent, or actions otherwise addressed.
Yeah, I mean,
Or
it's
legal
so hard
action.
to say what exactly you would do.
Right.
It's gonna be case specific.
Well, that's why it says may, so I don't
Right.
think we
Yeah,
even
yeah.
need to say or otherwise,
Right.
do we? It's just may be prohibited.
I think she wants to leave it open for other actions
May be
that could be.
prohibited from entering district property, dismissed. May be prohibited from entering district property, dismissed, or terminated.
Or
Terminated,
otherwise,
or
or otherwise dealt with at the
superintendent's
discretion of the superintendent.
Or other appropriate
Right.
actions.
I'm thinking of a situation that we had with a choice that a contractor made,
Mm-hmm.
which we found to be a violation, and that person was no longer allowed on the campus, but in addition to that, the contract was terminated.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I think it protects you to
I
have
do,
that
and
in
I'm
the
just wondering
policy.
how to say it like, I mean, there are
Mhm.
options. If this particular case, that was clearly the steps that we needed to take,
Mhm.
right?
Right, but if,
It might
to Kara's point, if we had left it as is, they would
Then
only
they-
be able really to.
They would be like, the
prohibit-
only thing you've got in
You can't put
policy.
that person on let them on the campus, or they have to be.
Then I would add those, I would add
would
those
add
things in
something.
with some discretion on the part of the superintendent
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
to,
I was gonna say, other actions deemed
as
appropriate by the
necessary, right?
superintendent.
Right, as deemed necessary.
Or
I
whatever
agree.
you wanna do, deemed
Yeah.
as, just to give
Yeah,
you
and we have,
a little broader flexibility.
Deemed necessary, just otherwise deemed necessary.
Mhm. Well, and I mean, I believe that all superintendents would use their discretion wisely.
Mm-hmm.
But this does allow you to really provide a very minimal consequence for a verified act of discrimination.
Mm-hmm.
So in theory, the only thing you could do to, like, you decide that the volunteer maybe has been around for 20 years, they meant well, but they clearly violated the policy, so the only thing you're gonna do is let them know they violated the policy.
Or require them to take training in some other way. or-
Yeah, and say you're no longer a volunteer.
But that's the thing, is the superintendent has the discretion to,
Right.
based on this policy, allow that person to remain a
To remain.
volunteer.
Mhm.
So there is no forced action, there is no required action,
That could also get dicey.
right? So, I don't know, this feels like it needs to be a little more robust, just in case.
oh, I like the language though. In addition, potential dismissal, termination,
actions deemed
or other
appropriate.
actions deemed appropriate by the superintendent. I think that kind of gives you it goes beyond the simply, remove from the property.
Right.
Why can't we say will then? This policy will be prohibited from entering, and then, because some action will happen,
Right.
not may happen.
Right.
It will happen, and it's as deemed necessary.
But you only take action if you substantiate an allegation, and if you say
Right.
you will, then that sort of precedes the finding of substantiation.
But isn't this
potentially.
as a result of a
That
finding of
violate the
substantiation?
This is a
It's called
result-
consequences and remedies, so.
Yeah, so assuming, you substantiate it, Yeah, if they determine that prohibited or illegal discriminatory conduct has occurred. So there you go. It is conditioned on a substantiated finding. Yeah.
Right, so I feel like we're one step further by adding
Right.
more potential consequences that are at your discretion.
Really beefed it up.
My second point is that because all of it is under the may and no shall, that in theory, you could choose to
not do anything.
not sanction, thank you, I'm like having a hard time with my words. You could choose to do nothing, other than notify them
Could be.
that they violated the
Could
policy.
be.
It would depend
And the circumstances.
on the circumstances and the severity of the
Mhm.
violation. The problem is.
So what's an example that you wouldn't do something if you're found? If we've already gone through the process? Like, I don't know what an example would be that there wouldn't be a consequence.
Yeah.
This is saying like there may not be a consequence.
No, but if this is a, mandatory minimum sentences type of a thing is what you're putting in there, and that you take away the discretion
Correct.
of that. And I'm not sure I necessarily agree with that. I'm trying to think of.
But I see it
a
as there still would be a
discriminatory complaint.
consequence.
There would be a consequence.
By saying
but-
shall, and it's still up to the discretion. But that this is,
Or other
by
actions.
saying may
If
is
it
like,
has other actions deemed appropriate by the superintendent, then yes, that would be included. You could put shall. Right? It's the question of severity.
Well, so I think ultimately the question is there a level of severity where we remove discretion from the superintendent and we say, if there is a finding, there is a common consequence,
A minimal consequence.
so that we can be assured as a board that if somebody's found in violation of a policy, that there is no discretion at this base level, which is essentially dismissal from or termination of a relationship with the district, unless you feel that there could be a violation of this policy by a person where you still feel that the relationship with the district is valuable.
That's the problem when you sit to make those decisions. You take all the information and you review it, and there are factors that are going to influence your decision.
but I'm not worried about you making those choices.
Well-
Thinking of future superintendents, like that I might not have control.
You have to have trust that they will make the
Right.
good decisions, and that's part of your responsibility as the supervisor of that position. So, I mean,
So
it's about
when-
communication and letting you know what the consequences are when I make decisions about difficult situations
Can
like
I
that.
ask you this then? Would you be willing to, as a superintendent, when it's time to discuss consequences and remedies, obviously this is a confidential matter, very few people
You know, that's a
know
great idea.
what happened.
Put it in to report back to the board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, could it be that at some point someone else is assessing, or notified of the consequences that you've chosen? Or would you want to work with the Title IX investigator to decide what the consequence should be, just so that the decision around consequences is never resting with a single person?
Yeah, that's a good point.
For accountability purposes.
Well, I do have those discussions with Karen. I mean, when I get the report and I read the report and I go through it and make some decisions, make sure the process was done, all the pieces to it. And we have some robust discussions about what the appropriate next steps are. But it's helpful to have that, to have somebody to bounce off of. I've used that with board, right, over the course of time. I would seek, by the way, legal help if I needed to. I
Great.
pick up the phone and I
Great.
call Dean, or if it's a labor issue, I might call Kathleen Peel. Do you know what I'm saying? So I use the resources available to me. I've called the Department of Ed and talked to Rich Farrell, our our teacher complaint. He's somebody that you can use as somebody to bounce ideas off of. So I get where you're headed with that.
Yeah. Well, how about this? In the first sentence, it says, if the district determines that prohibited or illegal discriminatory conduct has occurred, the district will take prompt, effective, and appropriate action to address this behavior. When we're saying district, we really mean you.
Right.
So what if we say, if the district determines that prohibited or illegal discriminatory, I can't say that word, conduct has occurred, the superintendent, in consultation with the investigator or in consultation with the
Legal.
board, legal, whatever, will, so there's that
Yep.
statement, you will take prompt, effective
Yep.
action. And then the secondary piece is sort of the robust list of potential
Dismissal, termination,
options.
right.
Does that sound good?
Yep.
If we just
Yep.
make it a little more specific in
I'm
sentence
good with
one? Okay,
Because the superintendent answers to the board.
yeah. Would there ever be a reason where this wouldn't rise to the level of wanting to consult with the board?
Boy, when it comes to this isn't like a light issue.
Right.
Yeah.
This is discrimination.
No, I'm
This
with
is
you.
a violation of our protected classes. This
Right.
is all the things that
Yeah,
that are important to us in terms of the
Okay.
way. Yeah. So
Then,
this is
then I think I'm comfortable with the language that the superintendent, in consultation with the school board, will take prompt, effective, and appropriate
I-
action.
I
Because
think
then
that says
it
it.
holds
I
us
think it says
accountable,
that.
it holds you accountable.
Yep.
It creates that sort of safety net of you not making decisions in a vacuum around, because I'm thinking about, some.
Previous cases.
Yes, exactly, previous cases or potential, community response to a
Yes.
volunteer being fired, or terminated. Because volunteers are usually community members and they might go into the community and make their own case. And so it's maybe
And it's
safer.
been, you have in those cases, just maybe not the discrimination cases, but other cases. Liz, you kind of just alluded to that.
Mhm.
The opinions range from A to Z.
Mhm.
And so I can think of a couple that, boy, everybody had a little different take on it.
Mhm.
And so I had to use my judgment and I had to make sure that I gathered all the information, including from the board, right? Where we would go in the case. So
Great.
I'm comfortable with your.
Okay,
I am.
thank you for working that out with me. All right, last page, Karen.
Yeah,
So exciting.
I just have one thought on that, Catherine. I know you're smart enough not to do it, but I wonder if your predecessor, I'm sure they will be, whoever that is. You have to be careful, as y'all know, about her sharing too much with you all because you all become the
Oh, before the
review
appeals
authority.
process.
Right.
Bingo.
That is a good
So don't
point.
the board. I mean, she can consult with legal counsel and others as appropriate, but I wouldn't say
But
In
this is at the
consultation with
very
the board.
end.
it's at the
This
very-
is at the very, very end. The appeals have already gone
This is
to
the
the board.
punish, this is the punishment, yeah.
Oh, yeah, this is at the
But
end of
This
the
is
process.
after appeals to us?
Right.
But there's
This
not
is-
necessarily, the appeal process doesn't necessarily occur. That's a
Right.
choice.
Right.
They have to,
That
they
is
have to
true.
elect.
They have to elect to do that.
Right, so
So-
we wanna be careful there
Yeah.
about,
So once the
Yeah.
appeals process has been, like, once that time window has ended,
Then
yeah, then you
so
cut
like
her
there's
off.
no longer
Yeah,
an
more.
option for appeal, then the board is no longer potentially, adjudicating this.
Right, then she could certainly-
Then it's time to decide consequences, at which time the board can be looped in,
Right,
right?
right.
Okay.
Yep, so we wanna be careful on that one, but, okay, training, good news is I do train on discrimination, now I can, once this is approved by the full board, I'll be able to point them to the actual policy for things other than sexual harassment, bullying, those kinds of, so on and so forth. The only recommendation or thing I wanted to ask you here, on the last page is in the paragraph that starts, the district will inform employees of the consequences of violating this policy, which goes to your point, and the remedies the district may use to rectify policy violations. All employees will have access to the district's current policies, required notice, and complaint forms, or should we just say all employees have access to the district's policies, notices, and complaint forms on the SAU 8 website? Because they do, they can go right on the SAU, you go to, as you know, school board, and then you go down to policies, and they're all right there.
I like have, because if they're already there, then they do have them, it's whether or not they've
Yeah.
been accessed.
It says will have access, but if we say have access,
Yeah.
I guess will means if they choose to use it. Okay, because my question was, do we want to put the SAU 8 website back in there to make it easier for them to find where they could find the policies, notices, and complaint forms?
I mean, in theory, if somebody, God forbid, doesn't know how to use the internet and wants to come to Central and get a paper copy, they can
That's
do
fine.
that.
Okay, no, I'm good. And we mentioned the SAU website earlier on in the
Yeah.
policy
Yeah, we
anyway,
did.
so. And then the only other change is I did change the language of 415, the title, to go back to the 2020 version.
Yep.
Board policy 160 was struck a while ago, it's
Right.
161. And then I added code of ethics and code of conduct for New Hampshire educators as one of the legal references,
Great.
who we could report to if necessary.
Mhm.
So I mentioned DCYF and Concord Police, but we could also be
Right.
the Board of Education. So that was it for my recommended changes.
Awesome. Quick question about how, if any, or what, if any, relationship this process might have with connecting somebody to the Commission on Human Rights. Like, do they have a separate, like, if they decide they want to take this to the Office of,
Yes, I thought I put that in here. Was it this one or was it on the?
maybe it's in 161?
It's a
Yeah.
separate process.
It's,
Right.
yeah, they
This-
can go directly.
This is the internal process.
Uh,
The process that they would engage in at the state level is a totally separate process. Are they,
All the outside agencies are listed on the appendix.
right?
Yeah.
But we would never, I guess my question is, we would never as a district recommend that action.
Actually, I
or-
inform them that that's their right.
Okay.
Yeah,
So it is
very
their right to do
transparent.
so, but
Yep.
it's not a natural, like, we did this, now we're sending this
No.
No.
to the
And
state.
in fact, I can tell you, if OCR gets a call on a case, they're gonna come to us and say, did you look at this?
Yeah.
But I always like to just be transparent and say, hey, listen, you can go directly to them.
Mm-hmm.
But it's gonna be more helpful to them to have us have done it, which
Mm-hmm.
we're gonna do whether they want us to or not, if we think we have to.
Yeah,
So,
okay,
yep.
thank you.
And that's at 180 days of the time that they should have known of the complaint or became aware of, so.
Awesome. Are there any other questions or comments from committee members?
No, I'm good.
What I will suggest is, because this is all sort of paired with 161, it might be a little odd to move this tonight, because then we're gonna see it without 161 at the next
I
board
agree.
meeting. So even though I do think it is ready with a couple of technical updates and some amendments, it's ready for first reading, are you guys okay with waiting until we see 161 again, and then we just move them all together?
Yes.
At the
Yes.
same time? Okay, great. So.
Because the full board will be like, I don't understand why
Yeah.
we don't.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, first reading is interesting because we're really just putting it to the board. We're not asking for comment at that time. So it would move the policy forward, but it's kind of paired. So I'm okay with waiting. And then, so there will be, unless somebody would like to make a separate motion, there are no motions that need to be made tonight to move any of these policies.
So you're also gonna hold the plan, I would assume, in Appendix A for 160, correct?
For 161?
161.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, well, and, the
161.
the
You wrote
plan,
161.
I think the reason we had talked about this, the plan doesn't really need to get voted on. The
Right.
plan is just your plan.
Well,
And
actually, you do have to approve it as a board.
It does say that
It
in the
does in
policy.
the
Okay.
policy.
so
We
do
have to
we,
approve
is it
the
the
plan?
appendices that we don't?
Right.
Appendices you
It's
don't.
appendices
Okay.
you don't.
So we'll move, so the next time we meet, we'll move the plan.
Okay.
We'll move 161.1. We'll have a clean version of 161 to move as well.
Okay.
Which I will dive back into. And you and I maybe could get together just to make sure we're
Yep.
working on the things. And then the next time we meet, we'll have these plus the pregnancy, lactation, and
528. And we have a,
One other.
what else we have?
Oh,
Digital, whatever. We have
What
a
about-
list if we get busy.
Next time we'll have 544, the weapons policy.
oh yes, yeah,
Yes.
everything
I'll
we're
put
seeing
weapons
here,
on, everything
we'll have
here,
at the next meeting
Plus
for.
lactation and pregnancy.
Yeah.
That's plenty.
That's
Yeah.
But we
that's
do
a very
have-
long meeting, but okay.
Yeah.
Hopefully this goes really quick.
Well, it
This
might
will
go
go
quick
quick.
because we just are gonna review all the changes we made. We've been through these a few times, so. The lactation and pregnancy really isn't a heavy lift. But
It's
we
pretty-
have other things like electronic signature ready for you. We have a number of things. Crowdfunding, we want to talk about that.
Chemicals.
My chemical plan, chemicals in the schools. So
Would it benefit us to have sort of a year in review list of like things that are coming up? So if there
Yeah,
are
happy
policies
to
that
do
you're
that.
ready for us to review,
I have a
maybe
list I keep on my things to do
Kind of
list.
Yeah.
more of a year in preview.
Oh, but that,
Yeah,
that
year
would,
in
that would be
preview.
helpful because then I
Year
can read
ahead.
the current policy
Yes.
ahead of time.
yeah.
Yep, I will do that. I will
And-
list that.
And we'll be able to manipulate some things to make sure that it's balanced and we get through it all. as
And I'm
well. I think
hoping to
it's
get
a-
through these things, because I think we're gonna see a lot of things come out of the legislature,
Yeah.
so I'm kind of preparing for that. I went to a hearing on Monday, on new legislation, so there is a lot out there.
Yeah. It's going to be a busy year, and
Yeah.
it has the potential to be a little chaotic. So I remind all of us members to be doing our homework. If there are policies sitting in our folders to read before we get here, have them read. Like, for example, Karen, when you come back with 161, if we have it in the folders before the meeting, we don't have to go through every technical change.
Yeah, we should be
Yeah.
able
What
to
I will
go
do,
pretty
what I will
quickly
do as
through
the
that.
chair is I will say, everybody has had the expectation that they've reviewed these technical changes. Are there any existing questions? No, we move on.
Perfect.
First draft, totally get it, but we've seen it plenty, I think. And so we'll
Mhm.
just address things, spot check things as needed. Because we are gonna have to move on and really tackle some more
Right.
policies in 2025.
And are we meeting during budget season? Because I know you have a lot going on.
I think we do have some meetings scheduled.
do.
You're really one of the few committees we tried to limit as much as we could, because you have budget twice,
Mhm.
a week, so. But we have policies scheduled.
Yeah. What time are our budget hearings? Are they all at 5:30?
Yes.
So if we did need to just advance something, like if we're gonna meet just so that we can see 544 one more time to advance, like this is just an example, and we're in budget season, we could maybe meet from 5 to 5:30
Could,
just to say, here is the drafts, we need to advance them, are there any motions? So we could do that as needed.
Yep.
So let's just be flexible. Are there any other comments, questions? And if not, I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motioned by Elizabeth Boucher, seconded by Jim Richards. All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned at 7:15.
Good job.
Thank you, guys.
Oh, gosh, I gotta push this.